Hey, and welcome to the podcast. We are excited that you're here today. Me, David, and Melissa are sitting down to do our third episode on the topic of middle school. And so you might be like, wait, we only did one last week. And so this is actually, if you go back a couple weeks at the end of season 4, me and Melissa sat down and did an episode on middle school. And we talked about what is influencing middle schoolers. Last week, we sat down and we talked with me and Melissa and David, and we talked about what was going on with communication in middle schoolers. And so now today we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about middle school and what comes about with leadership and how we can equip students to be leaders in both their church, but also in their schools, in their communities, and how we need to go about doing that. And so it should be another pretty awesome conversation. I love it, but we're going to jump right into it because we this is a cool conversation, and we hope to have as much time as we can. So let's see. We talked about this a little bit last episode, and we talked about how middle school ministry is kind of like a key developmental phase, but we more talked about the developmental structure of like they're trying to answer the big questions of life, like who am I, what am I here for, what is my purpose, and basically kind of like what happens when I die.
Mhm.
And so these basic developmental questions that everybody asks, but let's start with Melissa on this one. Melissa, why do you think middle school is such a key phase in spiritual development?
That's a great question. I think we're definitely at that age, and oh look, I learned something in school. Developmentally, they're going from this elementary where who they are is who their family is, who their parents are. That's where they get their identity. And then we move into the middle school age, and they're getting to be more of their own person, and they're not as much wrapped up in who their family is or who their parents are because they're going to do their own thing, right? And you could say that we made this shift 100 years ago where you just became what your father was. He was the tailor, you became the tailor. And so now we have so many students that they do something completely different than their parents are. And we've even seen they're probably going to do jobs that were not even invented when we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do with our lives, right? And so when you think about that concept, that means they're also trying to figure out what kind of person they're going to be spiritually, like what kind of disciple they're going to be. You could even go with what denomination they're going to be or what religion they're going to be. And there's so much more than that they are exposed to and that is available to them with the advent of the internet and texting and gaming and all that kind of stuff that we just didn't have. And so their options for what they can do, where they can go, is so much more.
I do think that that's a big deal. It goes back to the developmental questions that you're addressing. But the spiritual development is a huge part of that. When, like you said, you're moving from this transition of like, I go to church because my parents go to church, and middle school begins to start to see that little teetering. It's not quite a shift yet because your parents are still largely whether you're in church or not, but you begin to see the beginnings of at least some of the more mature middle schoolers being like, hey, I want to be here because I want to be here, not because my parents dropped me off. And you begin to see that little bitty shift where middle school is a really, really important step because they start trying to go from secondhand possessions to firsthand possessions. And a big one is faith. They go from this is my parents' faith or my youth pastor's faith or my grandma's faith or whatever to
Mhm.
like if I'm gonna follow this, I really need to make sure this is real. I really need to make sure that this is worth my time. And then I'm going to have other friends that start questioning my beliefs. And so I really need to know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so I think the more mature middle schoolers really, really hit this well. I think this is missed by probably 2/3 of the middle schoolers, though.
Yeah.
I think this is where a lot of the doubt creeps in. I think this is where a lot of the I don't really know if this is worth it because it's not popular creeps in. And so a lot of this spiritual development, you're kind of wavering on this firsthand versus secondhand thing, because if it's your parents' faith, and then your friend comes up and says, "Well, that's stupid," then you're gonna be like, "Well, it wasn't mine anyways, so it's like I don't really care. Like I'm not gonna do that anymore."
Mhm.
But if they've started to adapt it as their own and someone says that's stupid or I don't believe in that, they're going to be like, well, why? Like, it's what I believe, not what my parents believe. And they're available and ready to provide a little bit more of a defense when it comes to that.
And I would,
So, yeah, go for it, David.
sorry, I would even say, like, I think it's important to start asking the questions that you know culture is asking. And so, like this last, not this last Sunday, but the Sunday before that, because that was Easter, we actually sat down with our middle schoolers and high schoolers, and we asked two questions. The first one, and the second one was a follow up to the first one, but the first question we asked is, if God really loves us, then why does He allow bad things to happen? It is the age old philosophical question that has been asked since the beginning of time and will continue to be asked until the end of time. I think it's important to have the very hard questions because culture is asking the questions. And when it comes to exactly what you said, Brent, is if our faith belongs to somebody else, it is not hard to give it away because it wasn't yours to
Yeah.
start with. And so
Yeah.
when you ask those hard questions and they begin to dive into those things, and even if they don't necessarily know how to answer the question, to hear other people answer that question, they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. But what I really loved when we asked that question, our high schoolers were like, what? And our sixth graders were like, because God isn't the one who caused it. Our world is broken, and it's our sin and our mistakes that cause these things. And we have to stop blaming God for the bad things that are happening that we're causing. And I was like, sixth graders, guys,
Yeah.
don't tell me that they don't have it figured out. Don't tell me that they don't have a pulse on the world and the culture, and what's really going on. And so I think asking those tough questions that culture is asking, to give them the opportunity, even if you don't have an answer, they don't have an answer, having those discussions, they don't get floored by it and go and start questioning everything, as
Yeah.
Brent said, and just essentially come to a place of like giving it away because it was never theirs in the first place. Don't be afraid
Yeah.
to ask the hard questions.
Well, and I think that's a big part. And I think the middle school age is where you begin to slowly identify leaders. You get to see the ones that stand above the crowd, the ones that are not afraid, the ones that are willing to step up and not back down. And that might be in defending their faith, or that might be praying in front of a room. That might be, hey, I can play this instrument and like I'm not scared to play it in front of other people. Or you just see that they're passionate worshipers. We have a couple middle schoolers in our group that like they set the tone for the whole room because they are in it. And our high school, some of them are, some of them aren't, but most of them that are on the worship team. And so, like, I would say that our junior high, at least by population, out worships our high school right now as far as
I
intentionality and
believe it.
focus and presence. And it's something to really, really pay attention to because that's where you begin to find your leadership that progresses and moves your ministry or your church into allowing them to be the church of now and not the church of tomorrow. And
Thanks,
so,
Grace.
how would you define leadership though in context of a middle school student?
Well, I love that we allow them to have the leadership because we know that there are way more leaders in your middle school that are available to be on the student council, right? Like the student council, that's the only kind of leadership opportunity sometimes in your school. We know there's more leaders. And so I love that we give them a second kind of opportunity, because I know plenty of kids would never sign up to do the student council. You'd have to like try to get people to vote for you, but they have plenty of leadership qualities. So I love that this is an opportunity for them, because we
Yeah.
know that this is going to kind of
Yeah,
help them
for
in life
sure.
later.
Well, and I think the other thing is just like helping them see. Like, I love what you said about identifying the fact that that your middle school student, or you've got a couple of middle school students that help lead the tone for worship. That's huge. That makes a huge difference. And like when you notice something, we talked about this in the last episode. When you notice something that a student is doing well, being able to honor that and encourage that. And so I've got three middle school students that absolutely love to pray and do a really good job. So what I've done is not only do I give them as many opportunities to lead us in prayer, because they're the ones that if I go, all right, who wants to pray for us? Without hesitation. Like it's even gotten to a point they won't even raise their hand. They just start praying. But what I started doing is I started realizing that they were very good at praying and that they were comfortable doing it. And so I had them lead a workshop, if you will, with the rest of the youth that were. I just asked the question like, "Hey, who would say that they feel like they're either not good at praying or they're scared to pray?" And like almost every hand was raised except for these three students. And I said, "Great, in the rest of the time that we have today, I would like for you guys to explain to the rest of us why prayer is something that you don't find difficult. What is it that goes into praying for you? What do you like to pray about? Why aren't you scared? And it seems so simple, but in that moment, you elevate them to a place they're not just leading people their age. They're leading the high school students. They're leading the adults that are in the room that are like, whoa, I wouldn't pray. We have adults that don't want to pray. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden now you've got three students that are going, prayer isn't that scary. I like talking to God. And you're looking at high school students going, oh, okay. You've elevated them. That's huge.
Can I ask you, are they what's their gender? Girls or boys? That are the prayers?
All girls. I think you already
Good.
knew that though.
I did,
So
just based on the comment. But I will say
so
it's hold on, please.
There's
It
something
is
there.
it is. It's so good because out in the world, um, and this could be because there's a lot of Baptists in our town and they don't believe that women should be praying. But no one asked me to pray in public. And we're in a big group. They always ask guys, but they never ask me. And I'm like, I do this all the time. It's my job. I'm like certified prayer, and they don't ask me. So I thank you as a woman. Thank you for encouraging them. That's awesome. Good
I,
thinking.
one, I think it really goes down to just what you have and what your group is. Because I would say that I also have two or three junior hires that are diehard prayers and like their hands shoot up anytime we open. But they're all boys. They're all three middle school
awesome.
boys, and they are the athletes. They are the superstars. They're the popular kids in school,
Mm.
which is really really cool. And it's a way different dynamic shift than what you're normally seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really just regardless of what you're in or regardless of what your group does, finding those kids to really really like once again like leadership. A lot of times I think the biggest struggle with leadership, and I think our biggest disservice to kids as youth pastors in our ministries, is not seeing the potential that they have that they don't see themselves.
Yeah.
And so I think speaking life and speaking encouragement and speaking into those leadership moments is huge, because if you're not speaking into them, then they're going to listen to everybody else that's telling them that they can't do it.
Yeah. Well, and I love. Okay, I'm gonna go both of you here, both of your kids that are praying here, because the odds of them going into ministry are not super low, but maybe not super high either. And so now they're taking that ability into the workplace. They're taking that into their teams. They're taking them into all kinds of other, maybe their fraternity when they're in college. So they're taking that ability and that, I'm going to say power, into those other places. And so that's awesome. Good job.
Absolutely. I think it's vital. And yeah,
Yeah.
started to go
No,
deeper, but
and
it's a different topic for a different podcast.
so um what are some practical ways that churches can create leadership opportunities for middle schoolers?
I love the idea, and that's what I'm about to start building actually for this next school year, is a youth council where they get to even have it like a position, a title. But they're the ones that plan the events. Maybe they have a job where we're doing youth events, like they are um, hospitality or something like that, where so they're in charge of dinner, or something, those kinds of positions. So they're identified as what they are supposed to be doing, but they also have a little bit more control over our actions, about our activities and things like that. And so I love that idea. Um, I would love to bring that to the admin level, like the ad board of the church, to have a youth representative. We are just not there yet. So that's like my ending goal because I think they do need that voice, and they also need to see what it takes to actually run a church. Like, when I say turn the lights off, we don't want to pay all the money to the electric company. There's probably a reason for that. And so I would love them to be able to see the budget stuff and all that kind of what it actually takes to make a church building run.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, and so with that, our middle school, and yeah, pretty much middle school, I think they can help in fifth grade too. But our middle school gets to help with children's church, and so like they are teaching, they are in the
Hmm.
room with teachers, they are helping out on a weekly basis, and we have a whole rotation of junior high and high school kids
Yep.
that are helping there. And as we kind of transition, there's other things that they can help with. The middle school kids help with our vacation Bible school. They help with stuff like that. And a lot of times they are leaders. They're leading groups of kids around going from station to station,
Yep.
or they're doing the station themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of those interactions with that come from those. But one of the things that I would love to see more interaction is I would love to, especially those kids that aren't afraid of praying. And this is something I've been looking into at my church. I would love to see them start leading the prayer part, like the prayer portion of our church service.
We already do.
Um, and so with that, the guidance would be needed. Obviously, with this, with any leadership, there has to be mentorship.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just giving them the keys and letting them run amok, and that's not leadership. That's crazy. Um, but with that, I think mentorship is a big part. But that's a vital opportunity to give these kids, like Melissa was saying, some real life skills, some real opportunities for them to grow. Um, and be guided along the way to where they think it's freedom, but it's guided and carefully monitored freedom.
I mean, and honestly, and letting them know too. Like, I mean, we're we're directing, like we're leading the ship, but we're not totally free to just do anything and everything. Like we have rules and guidelines. Our pastor has
Mm-hmm.
got rules and guidelines, and they have a board, and they have people that they answer to. We have people that we answer to, and so I think it's important. I'm a big proponent of like not hiding things from our students. Like they, Brett and I have joked about this a lot at camp, but like our students know our safe sanctuary policies, which I know it's not called that anymore, but like they know them. Why? Because we're to- we're totally transparent on stuff like that. Like there's a reason why we have open doors, and I have no problem going, guys, keep the doors open. There's a really important reason for that, and so it's just little things like that where they start to understand like there is a scope and sequence to everything that we do, and there's a purpose and a plan behind it, and it's to number one, keep everybody safe, and number two, make sure that Jesus gets known, you know and as long as we can hold these things, and so giving them those opportunities to not just go, well, it just, the thing I always hated as a kid is when you'd ask the question why, and they'd go, because I don't, that's not an answer. That's
Mm-hmm.
deflection. That is completely kind of ignoring a person. If somebody asks me why, I mean, for the most part, I try my best to be intentional to answer the question if there is a answer that is appropriate for where they are. And I'm not saying like, because sometimes the answer is certainly over their level. I don't want to say it's over their head because it's not a dumbing down, but I think for the most part, just be real and be authentic. Because again, it was things like that my youth pastor did with me when I was at that age. That he wasn't afraid to tell me the purpose and the business and everything around it, and it gave me such an appreciation for the church at such a young age, and it made me want to dive in deeper and get more people involved, because I felt like I had an impact.
Brent, you're muted.
My bad. So yeah, this is definitely something that we all kind of have faced in churches, and I think this is almost a across the board question to ask. How do we combat the too young mindset in church culture?
We stopped playing into it. That sounds so simple, but like, you know I've heard it my whole life that well, middle schoolers can't be part of worship team because they're not old enough or they're not. And I think I can't remember if you said it in this episode or the last episode, but Brent, you were talking about there is a natural progression of levels and giving them places of like, okay, you're at this age, and when you get to high school you get to be a part of this, and there's always this sort of achievement level of growth and stuff like that, and I think that's vital and it's so important. But I also think that like if you perpetuate it, if you continue to allow that mentality in your adult leadership, then they're never going to be given the respect that they could have. And so I think it's important to put students out in front of um, like Melissa was talking about having a student represented or student representative in your leadership meetings. We have two. We have a middle school and we have a high schooler, and we always try to make sure that one of them is a girl and one of them is a guy. I think that's important because they start to see these students are doing so much and they can't be discounted just because they're young. I mean, and so I think the other thing, I've talked a lot about this in this podcast, in various episodes and stuff, but having that 3330 response of anytime somebody tries to what I would say downplay the role of what a middle schooler can do. I have a prepared response ready to go. Well, as you know, the vision of our youth ministry is X, Y, and Z, and this is how they are serving this
Mm-hmm.
vision. And then on top of that, I like to give the youth vision, but I also like to have like two or three things that our students are doing that specifically align with our church vision. So I could say, as you know, our church vision is to make disciples and in all the different things like that. And then I start to give examples of all the ways that our students, they like to step up and pray. They led a prayer workshop for our high schoolers. So they start to go, whoa, these middle schoolers are being challenged in ways that I had no idea, or like I was never challenged like that as a middle schooler. And I was like, because we have to change the narrative, and they
Mm-hmm.
start to see
Yeah.
that, and then they go, oh, okay, well, how can I help? And that's how I always try to end those is, this is how you can partner with us to help us continue to make sure that the middle schoolers are being equipped and not yeah, the other way around.
Yeah. And so as we start to kind of wind this down, I think Melissa, this is your question. Um, but what are some simple, real ways that students can be leaders in their school context?
I think what y'all both been talking about knowing exactly what they say if someone questions why they go to church, like if they have a maybe even a prepared answer at this age, right? Just not like a giant theological discussion, but this is what I believe and this is why I go. Um, I think that can be huge when they're talking about leadership in their schools because they're not going to be the type of student that backs down from a situation. And if they see something is not right happening over here, then they're going to step in on it. And so I think that's a great way that they can be leaders in their schools, even if it's not like making a plan and leading a discussion, but just being the kind of kid that goes, hey, no, we don't need to be talking about that other friend that way. Like just in those simple, because that's what I see with our middle school girls, especially is the tea and the gossip and she said and this happened and my ex, you're 12, stop saying that. Like the things like that, and so if they can just be those type of students that say, hey, um, you know, they're doing what they can do. Let's just leave them alone right now. Like we don't need to jump on this bandwagon of dumping everything on people.
Yeah. So, and as we begin to close up this episode, let's take a second. What is one thing a youth leader can do this week to begin equipping students?
I think it's exactly what Melissa just said. Having that prepared response and helping a student understand like that they have a role in shutting down negative things, and they have a role in being able to step up and lead and not being afraid of that. One thing I saw this last Wednesday night, our pastor was uh, talking to someone, and we had two adult guests come in who had never been in our church, and I saw a middle school student walk up to them, introduce herself, and then she walked around our fellowship hall area and was introducing them to like everybody, and they were like, hey, this is where this happens, and they were showing them around the sanctuary. The level of hospitality that they brought, and nobody had to ask them. They saw someone new and they stepped up and they did it. And so I think number one, encouraging that. And so definitely it was like I made sure our adult leadership team knew about it. I when I saw it happen, I'm not gonna lie, I took out my phone and I videoed it. And I got close enough to where like they didn't know I was videoing them, but you could hear what was being said. And then I sent it straight to our leadership team and said, "This is what we need to be doing. We need to do exactly what she's doing." And so it got to encourage that, but it also lets our adult leaders see that, and kind of trains us a little bit like, oh, hey, we need to remember to be doing that. And so, but I love what you said about having the prepared response. Like we may not necessarily know what to say in every situation, and so having something that we can physically give them to say, hey, this is what I'm about, this is what I believe, even if they're still kind of in the journey of it. Well, I mean, we all are, but yeah, I think having that prepared thing, that's something that we could all think about and give Sunday, like right away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Melissa?
I think that there's a lot of things that you can do. So I've been doing this long enough that my middle schoolers are now adults. And I get to see, we talk about that a lot, that we don't get to see the fruit of what we're doing in middle school because, they go out into the world, and we may not see what kind of people they turn into. I get to see this one. And so I get to see exactly how the person she's grown into. She's a 911 dispatcher. And so I get to see her do those kind of even hospitality things of, this is, are you okay? Like, that's a big one. Are you okay? What can I do to help? And so I think that's a big thing that we can show our middle schoolers now, not only how to do that, just to say, are you okay? How can I help? But I love when we can show them students that have already done that. Like, well, this is what the future could look like, kind of thing. So what do you have students that can come back to talk to your students now about what they've learned as a youth? And so I think that's really cool. But just those two phrases too, that could be done this week, right? Are you
Mm-hmm.
okay? How can I help? You can do that in your school every day.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I would kind of echo what both of y'all said. With that, the importance is, I mean, obviously there is a big deal with the with seeing what's already out there. There are students that are already stepping up on their own to be leaders, acknowledging and finding those things like David said, finding those moments to where you can absolutely encourage those strengths and utilize those strengths in the future and find them a place to be is awesome. But then I said this earlier in this episode, and I'm a big proponent of it. Don't be afraid to see potential that they don't see already. And that can be, hey, I have these three kids. Just by how they interact with other people, I know that they would be great at X, Y, and Z. Or I see this leadership potential in them. They don't see it yet. I had this past year, I had all my high school kids teach, but I'm already looking into middle school kids that I'm like, oh man, they'd be really, really good. Or hey, these kids, these middle school kids that are praying every single week, I'm just going to say, hey, we're going to start a prayer ministry and I want you three to lead it. Or something to that nature. Finding those opportunities to where you can equip the ones that are already doing it, but then you can also speak into the ones that might not have realized it yet. And I think that's something you can start right away. It's something that speaks value, which is one of the things that we brought up multiple times over the past couple episodes. But speaking value and speaking worth into their lives equates to leadership too. And if you say, hey, look, I see you as a leader, they're going to be like, what? Wow, really? That's crazy. My teacher told me I'm a moron. Like, whatever. And it's this one of these things that it's like it happens. I have conversations with kids all the time that are like, my teacher hates me.
My
It's like,
mom hates me. Yeah, same thing.
yeah, stuff like that. So be there, be that voice of encouragement, be that voice of uplifting. But for that is all the time we have for this episode. Thank you so much for being a part. Please, if you haven't before, or if you haven't in a while, go to our website, studentministryconversations.org. You can find all of our previous episodes, our show notes, and then also the merch that we have online. And then finally, we don't advertise or do anything. So if you would like to, we would love that you would share this with your student ministry friends. Allow this to be something that you can get the word out for us, because like I said, we don't advertise. So if you could do that, share this episode or an episode with your friends, share the podcast overall, or just have a conversation with us. We'd love to have it. And then finally, for this episode, I wanted to just ask, maybe you haven't answered this that we haven't thought of, and we'd love to hear from you. So shoot us a message on social media. How do you create a culture in your ministry that expects and celebrates student leadership? But we'd love to hear from you. Until we do, or until next episode, we hope you have a great week, and we will talk to you next time.